The sun was beginning to dip behind the tall green hills as Peter Rabbit bounced along the winding forest path, his little backpack bouncing with every hop. The air smelled of pine trees and wildflowers, and the distant chirping of crickets added a touch of magic to the evening. Peter's whiskers twitched with excitement. This wasn't just any regular day in the woods. No, today was the start of something special. He and his friends were heading out for their very first camping trip. By the lake, just the thought of sleeping under the stars, roasting carrots over a campfire, and telling stories in the moonlight made Peter's heart race. Behind him, flapping her wings to keep up, was Cottontail, carrying a tiny bundle of marshmallows, tied up in a handkerchief. Right beside her was Benjamin Bunny, dragging a rolled-up leaf mat behind him, his ears flopping with each determined step. "Are we nearly there, Peter?" Benjamin huffed, glancing around the forest nervously. "I keep thinking I hear twigs snapping." Peter grinned but didn't slow down. "Almost there. It's just past the blackberry bushes and down that little hill by the old oak tree. We'll reach the lake just in time for sunset." They'd been planning this trip for weeks. Mrs. Rabbit had finally agreed to let them go. After much pleading and a promise to follow all the safety rules, Peter had even packed a little map he drew himself, full of arrows, landmarks, and a big X where he thought they should set up camp. The lake was tucked away, hidden behind the thickest part of the woods, a place not even Mr. Todd the Fox visited often. As they reached the top of the final hill, the trees parted, and there it was, shimmering like a giant mirror. The lake stretched out below them. The water sparkled in the last golden light of the day, and soft ripples lapped against the shore. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and a family of ducks paddled peacefully near the edge. Peter stood still for a moment, just taking it all in. "It's perfect," whispered Cottontail, eyes wide with wonder. "Perfect for what?" came a sudden voice behind them, making them all jump. They spun around. It was Lily Bobtail, Peter's clever and always prepared friend, holding a basket full of berries and twigs. "You didn't think I'd miss out on this, did you?" She grinned, adjusting her headband. Relieved, they all laughed and hurried down the hill together. As they set up their camp near a large flat stone and a ring of pebbles for the fire, the excitement grew. They laid out their leaf mats, set up a stick to hang a tiny lantern made from a hollowed-out acorn, and arranged their snacks in neat piles. As the sky turned purple and the first stars began to twinkle, Peter lit the little campfire. It crackled and popped, sending sparks into the air. They roasted marshmallows and carrots, told stories about Old Brown the Owl and his midnight flights, and sang soft forest songs. Everything felt just right, but as the fire slowly faded into glowing embers, something in the forest changed. Peter noticed it first. A strange rustling sound, too big for a squirrel, too heavy for a hedgehog, coming from the trees just beyond their camp. He paused mid-sentence, his ears twitching. "Did anyone else hear that?" he asked quietly. They all fell silent. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the reeds, until it came again, a deep, low rustling, followed by what sounded like a soft splash somewhere out in the lake. Benjamin's eyes grew wide. "Maybe it's just a fish jumping," he offered, though his voice wobbled. Lily stood up, squinting toward the water. "That didn't sound like a fish. It sounded like something big." Cottontail clutched her marshmallow stick a little tighter. "Maybe it's a lake monster," she whispered. Peter laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "There's no such thing as lake monsters, right?" But even he didn't sound sure. The friends gathered closer, suddenly aware of how dark the forest had become. The moon had slipped behind a cloud, and the shadows around them seemed to grow longer. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, a slow, low sound that echoed through the trees. "I think we should go check," Peter said at last, trying to sound brave. "Just to be safe." "Check," Benjamin squeaked. "Out there, in the dark." But Peter had already picked up a small stick and stepped away from the fire circle. The others, hesitant but loyal, followed. Together, they tiptoed toward the edge of the lake, their eyes darting from shadow to shadow, every little sound making their fur stand on end. The surface of the lake was calm, almost too calm. A slight mist had begun to rise, curling like fingers, around the edges of the rocks. They reached the shore and looked out, the silence pressing in on them, and then they saw it. A dark shape, low and still, floating near the center of the lake. It didn't move like a boat or a log. It didn't make any sound. It just sat there, watching. Peter felt his heart thump hard in his chest. "What is that?" he whispered. No one answered. The shape slowly began to shift and rise. Before anyone could speak, a loud splash broke the silence. Water sprayed into the air as the dark shape vanished beneath the surface. The friends gasped and stumbled backward, nearly falling into the reeds. They looked at each other, wide-eyed and frozen. Something was in that lake, something that didn't want to be seen. Peter turned quickly. Back to camp, now. They raced up the little hill, the forest seeming darker with every step. They reached their camp, breathless and shaking. The fire had nearly gone out, casting long, eerie shadows over the stones. No one said a word as they huddled together, ears perked, eyes darting, and somewhere, just beyond the trees, they heard it again. That same low rustle, slowly getting closer. What had they seen in the lake? And was it now heading toward them? The answers would come, but not yet, because the night was far from over. The forest was quiet, too quiet. The fire at the center of their camp flickered low, casting long shadows across the trees. Peter Rabbit, his ears standing tall, kept his eyes fixed on the woods beyond. His heart was still thumping from what they'd seen. Something in that lake, watching them, moving silently through the water, and then disappearing into the night. Whatever it wasn't a log, and it certainly wasn't friendly. Lily Bobtail crouched beside Peter, tightening the straps of her backpack. "We need to think," she whispered. "What could it be? We know this forest well, but we've never seen anything like that." Benjamin Bunny, still catching his breath, sat on a rock and wrapped his paws around his knees. "I vote we go home. Right now. First light. Maybe even before light." He glanced over his shoulder nervously. "This place gives me the creeps now." But Peter didn't answer. His mind was spinning. They had come out here to camp, to have fun. Now everything had changed. He didn't want to scare anyone, but he knew they couldn't just run off without figuring out what was going on. What if it came back? What if it was already watching them again? Meanwhile, Cottontail had quietly crawled into her blanket and was hugging her stuffed acorn doll. She tried to act brave, but her eyes stayed wide open, scanning the treetops and the lake's edge. Trying to calm everyone down, Peter took a deep breath. "Look," he said softly, "maybe it's nothing dangerous. Maybe it's just an animal that's curious about us. We don't know for sure." "Then how do we find out?" Lily asked. Peter stood up slowly, brushing dirt off his fur. "We wait until morning, and then we explore." The others weren't thrilled with the idea, but Peter's voice had a calm strength to it. He was scared too, but deep down, he felt a strange pull to understand the mystery. The lake had never seemed dangerous before. He wanted to know what had changed. The night crawled by. Every creek, every hoot, Every splash made them sit up and glance around. But nothing else came. No shapes, no sounds from the lake, no signs of trouble. Eventually, the fire went out completely, and the friends drifted into uneasy sleep under the dark trees. When morning finally came, the sun rose slowly, warming the forest with a golden glow. The lake looked peaceful again, like nothing had ever happened. Birds chirped in the branches, and a dragonfly zipped past Peter's nose as he opened his eyes, but he hadn't forgotten. After a quick breakfast of berries and biscuits, Peter gathered the group. "We're going to search the lake," he said. "We'll follow the shoreline and look for clues, tracks, broken branches, anything." Lily pulled out her tiny magnifying glass and tucked it into her vest. "I'll bring my notebook. We'll write down everything we see." Benjamin groaned. "Why do I feel like we're walking straight into trouble?" Still, he followed. They made their way slowly around the lake, sticking close to the trees, their eyes sharp and alert. At first, nothing seemed strange. There were frogs hopping near the water, birds pecking at the ground, even a pair of turtles sunbathing on a rock. All looked normal. But then, near the far side of the lake, where the trees grew thickest, they found something. Large footprints in the mud, deep, wide, and clawed, not like any animal they knew. And next to them, broken reeds and crushed plants. Like something heavy had moved through the area. Peter crouched down beside them. Whatever it was, it came out of the water and walked right through here. Lily nodded, and it was big. Bigger than any rabbit or fox or even badger. Suddenly, they heard a rustle behind them. They froze. Out stepped an old friend, Squirrel Nutkin. His tail was puffed up like a feather duster, and he looked unusually serious. "You lot shouldn't be here," Nutkin said. "There's something wrong with this part of the forest. I've been watching from the trees. That thing, it doesn't belong." Peter tilted his head. "You've seen it." Nutkin nodded. "Only once. A few nights ago. I thought it was a dream. It came out of the lake slow and quiet, then vanished into the woods. I followed it, but it disappeared, left behind a trail of broken branches and muddy footprints. Same as you've just found." Lily stepped forward. "But what is it, Nutkin?" The squirrel shook his head. "No one knows, but I heard the wise owl, Old Brown, whisper something. He said it might be the Watcher of the Lake, an old tale, a creature that only appears when the balance of the forest is disturbed." Peter frowned. "Disturbed? How?" Nutkin lowered his voice. "There's been too much noise lately. Too many creatures from outside the forest coming in. Humans, strange animals, broken fences. Maybe the Watcher is here to remind everyone. This land belongs to the wild." That idea settled heavily over the group. If the Watcher was real, and it seemed very real, it wasn't just something to fear. It might be something they needed to understand, even protect. But Benjamin was not convinced. "That's great and all," he muttered, "but I still say we pack up and go home. Right now." Peter hesitated. He looked around the woods, at the lake, and at the quiet ripples touching the shore. Something inside him stirred. This wasn't just about being scared anymore. It was about something bigger. "We can't leave just yet," Peter said finally. "We need to find Old Brown. If he knows the legend, he might know how to stop it, or how to speak to it." Lily looked uncertain. "You want to find Old Brown? He lives deep in the forest. He doesn't like visitors." Peter nodded. "Then we'll be respectful, but we have to try. If we don't figure this out, something worse could happen." With that, the group packed their things and followed the narrow forest path, heading toward the ancient part of the woods where Old Brown's great trees stood. The trees grew taller there, the shadows deeper. The wind didn't rustle the leaves as much. It was a place of old secrets. As they got closer, the forest seemed to go quiet again. Not silent like before, but thoughtful, like it was waiting for them. And none of them noticed the pair of glowing eyes watching from the water's edge, behind them, just below the surface, unmoving, watching, waiting. The woods grew darker as Peter Rabbit and his friends followed the winding trail toward Old Brown's tree. Every step seemed heavier now. The forest felt older here, quiet, but not empty. Branches creaked overhead, and the air was thick with the smell of moss and damp bark. They didn't speak much. Even Benjamin, usually the loudest, was silent now, gripping his rolled-up mat like it was a shield. At last, they reached the foot of a massive oak tree, its trunk wide and knotted with age, perched in the hollow, eyes half closed, as if expecting them was Old Brown, the wise, mysterious owl that rarely spoke, unless he truly needed to. His feathers rustled as he looked down. "You've come about the lake," he said, voice low and echoing through the branches. Peter stepped forward. "We saw something, sir. Something in the water. We think it might be the Watcher." Old Brown blinked slowly, then nodded. "Yes, the Watcher is real, but it is not a monster young rabbit. It is a guardian. It sleeps for many seasons, only waking when the balance of the land is threatened. But we haven't done anything." Benjamin burst out. "We just wanted to camp, roast carrots, and sleep under the stars." Old Brown tilted his head. "You did nothing wrong, but others have. Look around your forest. Holes where trees once stood, litter left by passing strangers, loud noises, flashing lights, all things the forest does not understand." Lily's eyes widened. "Then the Watcher isn't angry at us. It's just scared, defending its home." Peter felt a knot in his chest loosen. Everything made sense now. The strange sounds, the watching shape, the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't an attack. It was a warning, a call for help. "So what do we do?" he asked. "How do we help fix it?" Old Brown turned his eyes toward the sky. "The Watcher must be shown that the forest still has protectors, that not all who enter wish to harm. If you wish to calm its fears, you must return to the lake. Not to hide, but to make peace. Show the Watcher your heart." It wasn't much of a plan, but Peter nodded. They didn't need to fight. They needed to be brave, kind, honest. So they thanked Old Brown and headed back through the woods, the path feeling a little clearer now, the shadows less heavy. By the time they reached the lake, the sun was beginning to set again. The water was still and glowing orange under the sky. The group stood by the edge, quiet and thoughtful. Peter stepped forward. "Watcher," he called gently, "we're sorry if we frightened you. We didn't come to harm your home. We love this forest too." For a long moment, there was no reply. Then, the water rippled. A shape rose slowly from beneath the surface. Not towering or terrifying, but smooth and round, with eyes deep and glowing like polished stones. It looked ancient, covered in moss and reeds, like it had grown from the lake itself. It didn't growl. It didn't move toward them. It just watched. Peter took a deep breath and did the bravest thing he'd ever done. He stepped into the shallow water, just enough for his feet to get wet. "We'll protect the forest," he said. "We'll clean what others leave behind. We'll teach the younger ones. You don't have to do it alone anymore." The Watcher blinked once, slowly. Then, just as quietly as it had come, it sank back beneath the water. The ripples faded. The lake grew calm again. The forest let out a long, soft breath. For the first time in 2 days, the rabbits smiled. They spent the rest of the evening cleaning up the campsite, gathering wrappers and broken twigs left by passing campers. Lily even carved a tiny wooden sign near the lake's edge. Please leave no trace. The forest watches. They didn't tell anyone else what had happened. Some things were too magical to explain. When they returned home, Mrs. Rabbit was waiting, of course, arms crossed and eyes full of worry. But when Peter hugged her tightly and promised to tell her everything, even she knew something important had changed. In the days that followed, Peter and his friends started small patrols through the woods. They helped tidy up, taught younger animals to respect the trees and water, and reminded everyone that the forest wasn't just a place to visit. It was a home, a shared home. And while the watcher of the lake was never seen again, Peter often thought about those glowing eyes and the moment they truly understood each other. It wasn't about fear or danger. It was about understanding, balance, and the quiet promise that if they cared for the forest would always care for them too. So whenever Peter passed the lake now, he always stopped to wave, just in case someone was still watching beneath the surface. And maybe, just maybe, they were, because the lake was calm again, the forest was healing, and the brave little rabbits had become something more than campers. They'd become guardians of the wild, and that's a tale worth remembering.